Welcome to Africa Speaks. I'm Pamela Anchang. I would like to welcome to today's show one of Africa's most powerful Pan-African networking gurus. He is the founder and CEO of the MIPAD, Most Influential People of African Descent, the world's #1 excellence network, founded in support of the United Nations International Decade for People of African Descent. Kamil Olufowobi. Well, so thank you so much for joining us, Kamil.
Thank you for having me.
This is awesome. You know, you do such amazing work, but before we get into it, I really want to know something about your origins, because behind every successful story, there are origins and all whatnot. So tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and how you managed to find yourself all the way out here in the United States.
Okay. Thank you again for this opportunity to talk about the work that we do. But first, like you've asked, my story begins in Africa. I grew up in the youngest of a family of 5, and my parents migrated to the U.S. So I'm a first-generation American. We were raised here in the U.S. My parents went to college here, and I started my journey in America from high school. And when we came to America, of course, is, you know, the home of the free, the land of the, you know, the land of the free, the home of the brave, where opportunities are for you to take. And when I got here, I took them. From high school, I became the editor of my high school newspaper, so I knew I liked media work. By sophomore year in college, I was set to become the editor of my college newspaper.
Amazing.
Right? But that didn't happen.
Oh, really?
That didn't happen. So that was the beginning of this journey for me.
Okay.
I didn't get that opportunity. I soon discovered it was a reality of being black in America. I think that was my first experience of racism being unveiled to me, the realities of being black in America.
Now, let me interrupt you just a little bit before we get to that. In terms of your origins, I see the beautiful outfit you're wearing, and I think every time I've seen you, you're wearing something special.
Oh, yeah, I'm wearing.
Is it a particular tribe or
group? So again, I'm Nigerian American.
Right.
My parents, like I said, are migrated from Nigeria.
What tribe?
I'm Yoruba, from the Yoruba ethnic group. I don't like the word tribe, so I always avoid it. But story for another day. But yes, from a Yoruba ethnic group in Nigeria, in West Africa.
I'm curious to know, you call yourself a connectologist. What is the relation? Where did that come from?
Connecting people, right, for the purpose of sharing ideas, information, and opportunities to create win-win outcomes.
Right.
So in English, people usually say that's networking for success.
Absolutely.
And the connectology for me it's been an evolution for me.
Right.
So I started this journey as a great networker. Many called me a networking guru. But the evolution has led me to a place where I now subscribe to be called a connectologist. And here's the difference. See, networking, right? Many people are out there networking to get. Wrong. You network to give, and as you give, you get. So the core difference between networking and connectology is that networkers are great getters. They can get what they want. But as a connectologist, I'm a great giver. So I've come into an understanding that the getting doesn't truly begin until you are very clear about what your give is, right? So connectology is, another way I can explain it, is the ability to stick with each other until we get to the destination. Like a stamp, right? You don't get off until you get to the destination. But networking, as soon as you get what you want, you get off that train.
So networking sounds kind of selfish.
Well, I mean, it took me some time to get here.
Yes.
But, it's been an evolutionary process for me, myself. And now that's why I'm out there, preaching, the importance of connecting with people for the purpose of giving your gift, rather than out there to get what you can from people. Because you cannot get out of life that which you have not put into life.
Absolutely.
Right? Just as you cannot get out of a bank, money you haven't put into the bank.
Put in there.
And you don't have to take my word for it. You can go down to Bank of America, right? And try to get money that you haven't put in
Even
there.
if I have a bank account,
right?
there's no money
Absolutely.
in it, I'm not going to be able to
so,
get it.
So let me say it differently. You see, if you ain't giving, you ain't getting, right? And people would ask me the question, what do I have to give, especially when you talk to young people? I answer that question by telling them that you have to give your gift. There's a school of thought that there's nothing God created that is the same, not even twins. Therefore, each and every one of us has a unique gift that only you carry that gift. And the journey of life is to discover what that gift is and then begin to give that.
That
right?
is amazing.
And when you figure that gift out, you start to give it to the world, then you start to get, right? So the hardest part is to figure out what is that unique gift that you have, and then you begin to deploy it in the service of others, which is what I do with the work I do. And you find that, doors start to open for you, and it brings you into the arena of greatness when you focus on the give, not the get.
So we should all be connectologists. Or
Well, pretty much.
At
Yeah,
least
strive to
be
Absolutely.
connectologists.
Not just to be out there getting.
Networking and getting.
get
But
what
we
you
should be
want.
connectologists.
Right.
I love that. I'm going to start practicing that if I
Good.
haven't. So let's talk about the work you do. You've mentioned it. Most influential
people of African descent.
100.
MIPAD.
Right?
100.
MIPAD, most influential people of African descent. MIPAD. How did that come about?
So the journey of MIPAD is pretty much a reflection of my story. Growing up in America, as a first generation American, when I'm in America, the Americans used to call me African, right? When I traveled to Africa with my parents in Nigeria, the Nigerians and the Africans would call me American. So my entire life, I've had, this dichotomy of two worlds that really didn't understand each other. And I always found myself in the middle, always trying to tell the other that, they're good guys and we should connect to Africa. They're good girls. We need to. And the one thing that binds us is Africa. And this journey for me was to unite these two worlds for the glory of Africa. So that really is how I always explain, MIPAD. It's a reflection of my story. And really, to be fair, okay, this is usually hard for me to talk about because my first experience of racism was being black in America. I came to America, the land of the free, the home of the brave, where they say opportunities are yours to take. And I came here and I started that journey. Quickly, in high school, I became the editor of my school newspaper. By sophomore year in college, I was set to become the editor of my college newspaper. This was unprecedented, right? But I didn't get that, and it hurt. And I didn't understand why, until I met an African-American friend who explained it to me, that this is the reality of being black in America, where opportunities are taken away from you because of the color of your skin. But I persevered, right? And I continued. I remember on this same college campus that deprived me of the opportunity to serve on the college newspaper, I founded the African Student Association, the first. In over 100 plus years the school has existed, they never had an African Student Association. So when they try to dim my light with what I love, my light said no, because I ended up being the leader of the African Student Association on campus. So in the face of racism, I persevered. I went on to corporate America, did tremendously well. But again, the realities of being black in America was very present, very present. But I persevered. And this time around, I decided to change environment. Maybe things would be better, and I moved to Africa. And I still experienced racism in Africa when I returned back to Nigeria to work for a major, multinational. This was when I discovered that this thing called racism was global. It was everywhere.
Where in Africa?
In Nigeria. I worked for a multinational, for an American company.
And the discrimination was coming
it
from
was
who?
it was yeah from it was systemic. What I discovered was it was systemic, and they say three is the charm, right? So the final, what broke the back of the camel, was when I didn't get the opportunities I expected to get, and the reason I didn't get it because it was sooner or later I discovered it's because I was black, because of the color of my skin. So this time I left, I resigned, and then joined the United Nations to support the International Decade for People of African Descent, to really help the United Nations fight, racism around the world. So that is how I came into this role, to support the United Nations as part of the International Decade for People of African Descent.
That is so amazing. You took this challenge.
Yes.
And transformed it into an opportunity for people of African descent. Correct,
because I figured there will be more people like me out there.
Absolutely.
Who are experiencing the same thing.
Let me talk about the fact that you mentioned that when you're here, people call you African. You go to Africa, and people call you American.
Yeah.
It's a very tricky line to walk.
Absolutely.
And most people face that. And not to mention the racism, being black. What is it like being black and male in America? That's a whole nother animal.
Absolutely.
That you have to deal with and that our children have to deal with.
Absolutely.
But I'm so happy that you transformed it. What is this, the United Nations International Decade for People of African Descent? Most Africans or people in the diaspora are not aware of it.
Absolutely. That's why we do what we do. It's to bring awareness to this decade. So a UN resolution, whenever you think of the United Nations, I want you to think 193 countries and 2 observer states are members of the UN. And they signed a resolution, non-binding, but it's still a resolution, which declared the International Decade for People of African Descent. And the decade is based on 3 pillars: recognition, justice, and development. And we partnered with the United Nations on the recognition pillar. So who are we recognizing in this 10 years to celebrate the contributions of people of African descent around the world?
Is this something that you think will continue beyond the 10 years? Is it like a foundation?
Yeah, well, when it started, the International Decade was 1 year. It was then extended into a decade. But I don't necessarily see it being extended beyond that. But what we're working on now is to have a permanent forum within the UN mechanism where people of African descent will have their issues heard by world leaders. So that's what the decade is. And we are focused primarily on the recognition pillar, which is the first pillar of the decade.
So what do you hope to accomplish with MIPAD?
So MIPAD, Most Influential People of African Descent, is a platform where we identify excellence in people of African descent, because currently that's not the narrative. No. Right. So what we're trying to do is to highlight that there's excellence in this color, and to find them, all over the world. And what we've discovered on the journey is that people of African descent are all over the world, sometimes in unexpected places. Outside of Africa, the largest, population of black people is in Brazil, over 100+ million who live in Brazil. And then when you look at India, the Sindhis, who were taken from East Africa, it's also another huge population of people of African descent. Melanesia, which is in Asia Pacific, is also an area where people of African descent exist. But here's what I always like to say. There are 2 kinds of people in the world: Africans and ex-Africans, meaning we were all Africans before we became anything else. True. So there's a collective responsibility that we all have to support Africa to live up to its full potential. How can we have one of the richest continents in the world that has a porous people in it? It's not by its own doing. Also external, and both external and internal influences is what got us where we are. But it's a collective responsibility. Absolutely. For all of us as humanity to make sure that Africa rises to its full potential. I'm curious to know, because one of the questions I have for you is, who are people of African descent? Are we going to be based on race or heritage? So what's your focus? So very good point. Like I said, when people ask me that question, I always say we're all Africans, right? But if you insist I explain my understanding of it, is you see this color is what binds us. We live in a world, a systemic order, where white is right and everything else is not. And what this work does for me is to find people of African descent who are of this color, who are being discriminated against, who are catching hell and high water in every corner of this world, and let them know that they're not alone, and start to connect them. This is where connectology comes in.
Okay.
To connect them for the purpose of sharing ideas, information, and opportunities of how to counter this global, system of oppression that binds us. Either you're in Pakistan, as a Sindhi descendant who exists there, or in Melanesia in Asia, or in Brazil as Afro-Latinas, or being even immigrants in the Americas or in Canada or in Europe. We all face the same thing. As sad as it sounds, what binds us is the misery of being black in this world, because the oppression is present regardless of where you are. And this journey for me is to connect us and to create a network where we can begin to share, best practices of how to counter this systemic oppression. So a collective awakening is ultimately what I envision with this work, is for us to see that it affects us no matter where.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just amazing. So what is the criteria for selection? What's the process like to be,
very good question,
be one of these brilliant
most
people?
influential people of African descent? It begins with an open nomination.
Okay.
So working with the United Nations, what we've done is, all over the world, we reach out to, people, Africans or non-Africans, to tell us who is a person of African descent, someone of, not necessarily immigrant Africans. I'm talking about ancestral Africans.
Okay.
So the way I always explain that is they're the recent immigrants like myself. My parents came to America, just, first generation. They're people of African descent who hundreds of years have lived in the Americas or in Asia or in Asia Pacific or here in North America or Europe for. So those people, right, we are looking for them all over the world, and we begin with an open nomination, and then we have a research team which is led by our chief research officer, who is a UN fellow. Okay. And that also helps in leveraging the UN Global Network to identify these people. So we have a selection committee after that. So the three steps are open nomination, the research team, and then the selection committee. And that usually comprises of past honorees, okay, because we know that they know, they say excellence recognizes excellence. So they would, nominate people, and then we go through a selection process. But what I always say to people is that to be nominated for MIPAD is an indication that you're doing something positive. And what we do is honor those 40 and below. And we've gotten a lot of pressure now from people who are 40 and above.
I read about that. I said 40 and below, forget me.
Absolutely. So because of, these kind of feedback, what we've decided to do is to start other editions, okay, outside of just the under 40 edition. The under 40 edition was our flagship edition.
But why 40 though? Why 40 and below? Because sometimes maturity comes.
Well, because the journey for the work that we need to do will require another generation of people to really take on this work. It's a long-term vision. So we figured we could work with those who are still impressionable, who have exhibited high achievement very early in life, because this would help us counter the narrative that excellence doesn't exist in our color. When you look at some of the people we've honored over the years, from Trevor Noah to Chiamanda to Usain Bolt to Lewis Hamilton, some of these are great people of African descent who, at a very young age, had broken barriers. They've opened doors, for us. That was why. And you know, the under 40 was, it was young, it was hip, it was just fun. They were just a fun group to kind of highlight to the world. But over time, with the kind of feedback we've gotten, what we've done now is to create other verticals.
Right.
So outside of the under 40 edition, we have the most influential First Ladies edition, for example. We have the most influential Royals.
Because we need people like Barack Obama to be at least recognized.
Absolutely. So categories for people who are above 40 include our Diplomacy and Protocol edition, our Royalty edition, our Energy edition, Healthcare edition. 100 of the most influential people in all of these sectors, regardless of age.
So what are the different areas that you look at when you nominate your different people?
Okay, so for the under 40 edition, we have 4 categories. So politics and governance, business and entrepreneurship, media and culture, humanitarian activism, and religion. So those are the 4 key corners that we identify for the under 40 edition.
I'm going to pick on that religion.
Yeah, tell me.
That's the first time I'm hearing a category for religion. I just find it curious. It's interesting.
Well, spirituality is something you can't take away from us as a people.
Well, religion and spirituality, are they the same thing, though?
Well, they're not. But, you know, either way you look at it, it's something you can't really take away from us. We're
Why
very
do you want
grounded.
to reward that?
Right, and we want to recognize that. One of the beautiful things about the 4 categories is these are the 4 key pillars of any society.
Right.
Politics, business, you know, culture, and also humanitarian or religion. These are very key, you know, pillars that hold up any society. So that is why we identify these honorees for the under 40 category.
Okay.
So for the other special editions, we call them, for the First Ladies, for the Royals, for finance and the Finance and Wealth edition.
Okay.
So the Energy edition, the Healthcare edition, the Diplomacy and Protocol edition. We look for the 100 of our greatest minds in all of these sectors.
Regardless of age.
Regardless of age. And here's the interesting thing. Doing this work, I've discovered that our greatest minds are working everywhere else but in Africa for the glory of everywhere else but for the glory of Africa. So why we do this is to start to identify them, to let them know that we see them.
Yeah.
And then begin to create a community, an ecosystem of high achievers, and start to remind them that Africa needs to be where it is, and they have the brains and the capacity to support Africa to fulfill its greatest potential.
You know, you talked about racism and how it has affected us.
Yes.
But I'm curious to know, however, what are some of the things you think that we do, that we could learn from these influential people that could propel our success or make them become influential?
That is a brilliant question. And that's why we do what we do.
Yes.
So to be clear, we have a section in the publication, our Global 100 publication, that is the definitive guide to Black excellence.
Okay.
And what that means is we get keys of success from these highly, you know, high performers. What did they do differently to break these barriers? How did Lewis Hamilton in Formula One dominate that industry? How did Serena Williams, you know, dominate tennis, or Tiger Woods dominate, you know, golf? Or, you know, some of the greatest scientists that NASA has are of African descent. So imagine we're able to collect these keys of what they did, and we hand it to the next generation.
Absolutely.
Right? So that's why we do what we do, why we catalog this success. 1, for us to see that it is possible. 2, for the world to also see that, yes, there's excellence in Black, but also to support the next generation to know that it is possible. And here are some of the tips that you can use in, you know, continuing the footsteps or break new barriers.
So you're putting in some database that someone can...
Yes, so it's in the publication. So when you do pick up one of the publications, we have a section in there called The Definitive Guide to Black Excellence. And it's a compilation of the keys to success for a lot of these high performers that we have recognized over the years. You
know something? Someone once told me that Africans are very successful individually.
Right, but not collectively.
Exactly. How can we, now that you agree, how can we combat that? Well, I mean, it is to see that it is, you see, influence
cannot be understood unless it's manifested. And it can only be manifested when it's collective, right? So this idea that we hear all the time about being united, you know, united we stand,
divided,
right? Divided we fall. It is one of the greatest tools that the system of oppression has used to separate us. You know, you divide to
But
conquer.
it does say divided we fall, united we stand.
Right. So we have to learn that. We see, even though the chains of slavery or servitude has been broken, you see the mental bondage is still there, right? So the mental slavery is still there. So we have to move beyond that, where we need to see that, you know, collective, you know, individual success is not enough for us to break, you know, this system of oppression. It has to be collective.
What is it that makes us do that anyway? Why do we think we have to succeed individualistically?
Here's what I always say when we have this conversation is, are people who have been told for 500-600 years that they don't matter,
right?
That they are not worthy, there's something wrong with you, or they're not enough. You find that they don't see value in each other, right? So this is a narrative that we've been told as a people for hundreds of years. So when you see us reacting, when we see another, you know, person of color and see that there is no value in them, and we find value in everybody else but ourselves, it's because of that narrative that has become a part of our psyche. And that is why we do what we do, to try to break that, to let you see that there's value in the other person. So I'll give you a very clear example. Is during the UN General Assembly, when all heads of state come to New York, which is when we bring all our honorees to New York, what I observe in the interaction is that the Africans don't interact with other presidents of African descent, the Caribbean, or from Latin America, or from, you know, any other part of the world, because they all come to the table to, I hate to use the word, but as beggars on this table, you know, of this, you know, of the imperials, you know, so they don't see value in each other, to talk to each other, to create wealth, because they're all here at the table with their hands out. So they don't see each other as being valuable. But that's, again, they're out to get. You see, influence cannot be understood unless it's manifested. And it requires a collective effort to make, you know, to manifest, you know, collective success, right? So why do we, you know, why don't we collaborate more? My theory is because as a people, for 400 or 500 years, we've been told we don't matter, you know, we're not worthy, there's something wrong with you, we're not enough. So when we see each other, we automatically don't see value in each other. That's why we work with everybody else but each other. Like I said, the work I do, our greatest minds are all over the world working for the glory of everywhere else but Africa, right? Africans leaving Africa on boats, dying in the Mediterranean to get to a new world, when Africa is the richest continent in the world, where the possibilities can be, you know, can be found on the continent, but we believe there's something greater out there. So this, for me, comes from, you know, 400 or 500 years of a narrative that has told us that we don't matter. So what we do with this is to highlight and let you know that you do matter. That excellence does exist in you, and when the world tells your light for you to dim your light, let your light say no. You know, I really hope that what you're doing is going to make Africans start knowing that there is enough for everybody. Because it almost feels as if there is scarcity, and so everybody's trying, let me be the one. Let me be the one. So you nailed it. So we, as Africans or as humanity, we make decisions from a place of scarcity rather than from a place of abundance. There's more than enough to go around. Tell the camera. Yeah, absolutely. There's abundance. You know, there's more than enough. And for us to start to make decisions from a place of abundance, to create win-win outcomes. Absolutely. Right. So what happens is we create win-lose outcome. I win, you lose, because we believe there's not enough. And then I'm great. Right. But then you're not really, because greatness is when we are, you know, collectively free as a people. Right. You're not free until I'm free. We go back to connectology. Yes, absolutely. Being able to connect for the purpose of sharing ideas, to share ideas, information, and opportunities to create win-win outcomes. There you go.
See,
right?
I'm getting it slowly.
Yeah, you're getting it. We're getting there. Absolutely.
You know, I like a certain philosophy. I read it, I think, in your bio, but thinking globally and acting locally.
Locally,
I
yes.
couldn't really figure it out, but I kind of had an inkling, so break it down.
Okay, so the reason why I'm able to do this work is
Yes.
I'm a diplomat in training.
Okay.
I went to my master's degree was in global affairs,
Okay.
preparing me to work on the international stage. But even before that, I had the opportunity to travel and see the world. So in college, I had a scholarship to go to Singapore. So I went to school, college, on an exchange program in Singapore. I had the opportunity to work with my company in China. I've visited pretty much 5 continents around the world, over 40 plus countries. I've seen the world, and my love for Africa, you know, brings me back to support Africa because I've seen the possibilities of the world, and I know that we have the brains and the minds to do it. So yes, so I'm able to think globally, but act locally for the glory of Africa. So that's the story there.
So the thinking globally and acting locally, how would that, you know, reflect in my life, for example?
Yeah, it's the ability to, you can live anywhere in the world and still support Africa.
Oh, okay.
So many a times when people ask me what I do, I always use this analogy that I am in the light business. We're lighting up the world, one person of African descent at a time. And I ain't talking electricity.
No.
Right? So what that looks like is identify lights of African descent all over the world. So I want you to close your eyes and visualize Africa, which is said to be the dark continent. And you see light leaving, you know, these, you know, beacons of light leaving the continent and going everywhere else. With some, you know, light left on the continent. So what we do with this work is to identify these lights that are all over the world and connect them back to the origin. And let the world know that these lights belong to this continent. And then what we do is to connect the lights outside with the ones inside. So who's your counterpart inside Africa who does what you do? So this is the way I like to, you know, help people visualize this work that we do of being a collector of light. And when all of these lights start to shine bright together collectively, you see that the ones called dark continent will start to be what? To shine bright.
Illuminated.
Exactly, will be illuminated. So Africa is not the absence of lights to get us where we need to be. It is the absence of a conscious, deliberate effort to work together for the glory of the continent.
Kamil Olufowobi.
That's
Am
right.
I calling that name correctly?
You are
just
spot on.
awesome. Because that is what we need in the diaspora.
Yes.
So you think? Because most Africans straddling that, being here, they want to be African and they're called African, and then going back home and being called American.
Americans, yeah.
And yet we're looking for that identity. So you can be here.
You can. So I am not a big supporter of the move back everybody. You know, get everybody back on the boat or the plane and move them back to Africa.
We
That's
don't
not
have to
what
do it if you
we
can
don't.
think the way that
you have
just
to
said.
think globally and act locally.
Exactly.
So let's give specifics.
Yes.
So I can live in California and work with a production company to create some authentic African stories.
There you go.
Leveraging Hollywood to reach the world, which is what Black Panther did. Right? I don't necessarily have to live in Africa, but I'm connected to Africa. You see, Kwame Nkrumah once said that, you know, I'm not African because I was born in Africa, but because Africa was born in me. So regardless of where we are, remember what I said. People of African descent live all over the world. We've been spread all over the world. And sometimes sprinkled all over the world, which is a blessing. Many a times we look at it as a curse because we were taken, for most part, as slaves and spread all over the world. But really, when you look at it, it is a blessing because now we exist in every corner of the world.
Yes.
Sometimes in unexpected places. And we're high achievers. Whenever we get it right, we get into a space, we do well. So if we can continue to bring all of this success we achieve outside and redirect it into Africa, we can collectively lift the African continent. So we don't have to move back to Africa for you to make Africa great.
You know, thank you for making my conscience feel lighter.
Yes,
because
right. Most people make you feel like you gotta go move back to Africa.
You're betraying the country. You're betraying the motherland.
No, wherever you are, just be activated,
yes.
knowing that you're working for the glory of the continent. Whatever you do, you continue to do it well, so that you can let the world know that yes, there's some bad apples. There are bad apples in every society, but there are also good ones, and you're the good one, and you're representing for Africa. So that's, you know, that's the way to think about it.
It sounds like the way the Jews think.
Absolutely. Anywhere in the world they are, they're doing great, right? Yes. And it goes back, it's reflected.
Defend
the continent. And what you find is that people are not, they have not bought into the African dream or the African story.
Yes.
The negative narratives of Africa, many shy away from. Even I, as a kid, when we were growing up, my parents, punishment was, you are going back to Africa. It used to be a punishment because the narrative of Africa is this place
that nobody wants to
I never wanted to go. But today, look at me. I moved my family back to Nigeria. I'm raising my children in Africa because when I got there, I realized that it was the greatest lie that they ever told us, was that Africa was not great, or Africa was not amazing, Africa was not beautiful. So when I discovered that, so I'm running back into the diaspora to tell everybody that they lied to us. The narrative was lying to us, but Africa is the greatest place on this planet, and we need to work together collectively to make it live up to its full potential.
That is very compelling. That's true. We need to, if we paint a
better
picture of Africa, why won't our children want to go?
Absolutely.
You know, but let me ask you about our relationships and the dynamics with our African American and Caribbean, you know, Afros, Latinos, and all those communities, Brazil and all these places.
Mexico, Colombia.
The continental Africans and that aspect of the diaspora. How can we collectively harness each other's values?
Absolutely.
For the betterment of the continent and for black people in general, as you say.
We must begin from a place of awareness. Okay. If you ask the average continental African that there are 11 million black people of African descent in Colombia, they look at you like, huh? You ask them, you tell them, where is the largest population of black people outside of Africa? They don't know it's Brazil, right? Where the cultures that left Africa through slave trade still thrive in all of these communities in Latin America. And even when you look to the east, you know, to India, you find people of African descent exist there. Thanks to MIPAD, you find that the vice president of Costa Rica is an Afro-descendant, a black woman, is a vice president of a Latin American country, which is a very, you know, high level for a person of African descent to rise. Thanks to MIPAD, she had the opportunity to meet a person of African descent who's a member of parliament in Pakistan. They didn't even know each other existed.
Wow.
So this is what MIPAD's core mission is to create an awareness of all of these people of African descent all over the world who are, what binds us is this global systemic oppression that we're all facing in different ways, but still at the core of it is still there. So when we start becoming aware of each other, start connecting with each other, start building economic, cultural, you know, and political links with each other, you find that we build, you know, systems that can ease the burden of this global, you know, racism that we all exist, regardless of where we are.
What about the fact that on a primal level, when our African American communities are out there advocating Black Lives Matter and all whatnot. Now, my children were born here. I have 2 boys. And my son told me one time, he said, Mom, African parents don't understand what we go through
here.
Should we African parents, therefore, try to congregate and support these movements? Because we just seem to, we have that African mindset, and it's almost as if we're living in isolation of what is going on around us. How can we then, on that basic level, support those movements?
You see, the basis of the question you asked me is so powerful, and I love to talk about it, is we've had a history where continental Africans were involved in the trade of human lives of Africans who were sold into the diaspora. That's why we're spread all over the world. And one of the modern expectations of Africa is that the diaspora should come and help us and save us. But the question I always ask Africa is, what are you doing to save me in the plantations of America where I'm here and they can shoot me dead because I'm black, but no black nation rises up to support me? This is the beginning. This is what Africa's consciousness has to become. The African Union and African countries need to start to sanction countries where people of African descent are being discriminated against. That is why the International Decade exists, is to support and protect the human rights and civil liberties of people of African descent living across the diaspora. Thanks to our collective effort, the African Union now officially recognizes the decade. Wonderful. Based on an engagement that MIPAD has had with the African Union to recognize, you know, the lives and the civil liberties of people who look like you and I, who live in Brazil, who live in America, who live in Canada, or who live in Europe, who get killed because they're black. So I think the reconciliation that needs to happen between Africa and its diaspora is that Africa needs to now start to stand up for its diaspora. The fight we did not fight when our ancestors were taken from the continent.
It's time.
Right? This is the time for us to do that now. We didn't fight that system then. If we fought and died to ensure that nobody was taken in from the continent by the Europeans, we would live in a very different world today.
You know, I love that you've given Africa the responsibility.
Oh, absolutely.
Because why are we always going to pit Africa as that continent that's always
in need of help
constantly?
Remember the philosophy, networking versus connectivity, the ability to give.
Stop networking and start to connect.
Connect, and that's the word. Africa needs to now connect to its diaspora, and connecting means you give. What are you giving? You give political clout to protect the human rights of people of African descent. No African country, zero, has officially recognized the International Decade. Out of the 193 member states of the UN in the diaspora, less than 10 countries have officially. Where are the African countries? Where is the African Union pushing these governments in America and the UK to recognize the decade and protect the human rights of people of African descent?
You know, that is very interesting because weren't they all part of that decision, that declaration?
Yeah, but you know, yes, it was a resolution that was signed, but today the idea is now the countries need to have national plans of what they need to do to protect the human rights and the civil liberties of people of African descent. So this is a role that African governments can also play, to be a lobbying group. What we have done is to create a lobbying group that can pressurize the governments of Brazil. Our honorees who are in Brazil are very influential to see if they can work together to pressure their governments to recognize the decade. We've seen successes with Canada, where influential people of African descent have worked with their government to have the decade recognized and actually have a national plan where the government has allocated federal budget in Canada to support the International Decade. This is one out of 193 UN member states.
Your work cut out for you.
And we are 5 years in, so 2020 would be the mid-year for the International Decade, and the results have been they're not encouraging, but there's a lot of work for us to do, and we will continue to do the work, and that's why we're building this global network of actors who can lobby their governments to recognize the decade and implement.
How can you leverage the diaspora to foster this MIPAD's vision?
Yes. The first thing is let's get the decade recognized by your local municipality, from the mayor of your city. Right. It doesn't have to be country level. It could be state level. Your school to recognize it. Let us get, you know, local communities recognizing the decade. So it's getting laws changed to support, you know, the decade. So it doesn't have to be on country level, because that could be, you know, really an uphill battle, but we can start from where you are in your own city.
I don't know why it's an uphill battle for the countries, because they were part of the resolution.
Yeah, but there's a difference. So the resolution is non-binding. The UN resolution is non-binding. So each country has to make a decision to officially recognize and begin the work of implementing the decade. So they have to have a national plan. So how do we now create legislation to protect the civil liberties and the human rights of people of African descent? So that's the work that needs to be done in policy, in laws that needs to be created. And many countries, you know, they still do not respect, you know, our color. It's still the fight. So what Africa can do is to stand up for its diaspora, and in return, you know that the diaspora will continue to. Let me close with a vision I have, a vision of an Africa that gives and connects with its diaspora.
Yes.
Remember, give, connect. You connect to give. And give money to support the economic growth of Africans in the diaspora.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to see African banks have branches in immigrant communities in the diaspora where they give money to African immigrants to create more wealth here, because ultimately they do send billions of dollars back to Africa. But imagine if African financial institutions are here supporting entrepreneurs of African descent in the diaspora, in Brazil, in Pakistan, in Australia, in America, in Canada. African banks. The reason why I say that is the financial institutions here see you through the lenses of race.
Absolutely.
They give you just enough to fail.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Imagine we have economic support from the continent. That's a vision I look forward to. A vision of political support from Africa to the diaspora, where an African American wants to travel to Africa today, they have to get visas. Why don't we have an AU passport for people of African descent to be able to visit, do business
Absolutely.
in Africa? So Africa needs to begin a journey of connecting, which is to give its diaspora, because they were taken from Africa with our consent. And it is our moral responsibility to look out for them in the harsh reality of being black in the diaspora, and sometimes even inside Africa, right? So collectively, Africa has to take that responsibility, stop being seen as the weak partner in this engagement. Exactly, because Africa is not. Africa is the richest continent in the world. Some of the richest black people in the world are from Africa. The richest man, the richest woman in the world who are of African descent are based inside Africa, not in the diaspora. So there's a lot of wealth on the continent, but we have to start to focus on it and build collective black wealth from the continent.
Don't you think that Africa is going through a leadership crisis, and maybe that's why some of these things are not being done? Because if you look at Ghana, Ghana has declared this the year of the return.
Year of return, yes.
That's leadership right there.
That's fantastic leadership.
That's just amazing.
Absolutely.
And other countries need to follow suit.
Absolutely.
I bet you before you know it, Ghana is going to maybe have the first bank, and that's a very powerful
So
thing.
leadership comes, like I said, by example. Ghana has taken a very strong stand. We actually recognized Ghana with a special commendation award for what the president of Ghana has done with declaring the year of return. So yes, more African countries need to follow that lead. But many of them still do not understand the impact of the diaspora, the economic wealth and the expertise that the diaspora have. Remember, I said some of our greatest minds are all working outside in the diaspora for the glory of everywhere else but Africa. So if Africa can begin to engage, to give support to the diaspora, in return, knowing that we can get economic support and we can get expertise from the diaspora to come back home. So it's a two-way street.
Do you see, living in Africa and having lived here, do you see while living in Africa that maybe the problem is also that the continent sees the diaspora as a threat as opposed to a collaborator?
Many a times, yes. When I returned back to Nigeria, I was seen as a returnee. And returnee meaning, you know, I'm a foreigner in my own country who came back home. Yeah, so that is also a problem. So we need to tackle that. And one of the ways to tackle that is for national policies that support returning of
it should
the
encourage,
diaspora.
actually.
Yeah, encourage it for you to come back and be a part of nation building. But I say that relationship needs to begin from Africa paying closer attention to the fact that it has lost a lot of population, the brain loss. We need to start working. The brain drain has happened. We need to start looking at the brain, gain. But it has to be a conscious effort.
Yes.
And historically, there's trust issues that exist between Africa and the diaspora. So we need to also tackle that. So reconciliation is a very important thing that we need to work on.
We need to all work on.
And what Ghana has done, inviting the diaspora to come back, is very powerful. And I always say when, they visit Africa as ancestral diaspora who have been disconnected from Africa, when they visit Africa, they should always plant a tree when they get to the continent, so they can say they really have roots.
Oh, that's so beautiful. That's
in
a beautiful
Africa. Yeah.
Concept right there.
Absolutely. So we encourage that. So when people of African descent visit Africa for the first time, in a number of countries, we're trying to work with the governments to create tree planting activities for these people of African descent visiting to plant trees, so they can say they actually have roots. In Africa.
Throughout this conversation, we've talked a lot about what the government can do, what leaders can do, and all whatnot. But at the end of the day, if they don't do it, what can we do as individuals? Let's wrap it up on that. What can we do? What can someone watching us right now do?
What
in terms of, first
play?
of all, surely mindset will be number one. But what can they do concretely to make that shift?
Be African and own that. Every day, this is what I look like, right? Represent and be clear about who you are. It is the absence of us as Africans knowing who we are why we continue to suffer under the system of oppression. But when we love ourselves, when we love what we're about, when we love all things that are African, it is the first step for us to counter this narrative that excellence doesn't exist in our color. So that's the beginning of it, is the love of self, the love of our hair, the love of our culture, the love of our religion, the love of our language, the love of our food, and wanting to share that and give that to the world. It begins there, knowing that we matter, knowing that we're lovable, knowing that there's nothing wrong with us and that we're enough. It begins there. I think that's the first advice I have for anyone is love being African. It's a beautiful thing to be African. And I always say that the reason why we are black is because of the melanin. And the melanin comes from our relationship with the sun. Therefore, it means that we have been on this earth. We have had a longer relationship with the sun than anybody else on this planet, meaning we are God's firstborn. So we cannot be inferior.
Absolutely.
So love being African, because before you were anything else, we were all Africans. So for me, that's the first and the most important tip I would give anyone, individual. Know thyself, love being African, because it's a beautiful thing.
That is so amazing. So tell our viewers where they can nominate. Is it open nomination?
So it's open nomination on our website. So MIPAD stands for Most Influential People of African Descent. That's MIPAD.org. You can follow us across social media at MIPAD100. That's MIPAD100 across social media, and visit our website to learn more of how to nominate people of African descent who are exhibiting excellence where they are. So I like to call it Black Excellence Worldwide. So wherever they are around the world, let us know.
Absolutely.
And they're sometimes in unexpected places. So do nominate them. This is a program that would run till the year 2024.
So the decade, have time.
Right, so we still have 5 more years. But spread the word. There is a living document, a UN resolution that said the world to recognize the contributions of people of African descent within this 10 years. So let us join the United Nations and the global community to recognize the contributions of people of African descent around the world.
And if you do that, you just might get featured.
Absolutely. We look forward to that. It's always a joy. We've recognized over 500 people of African descent in the time that we've done this work. And class of 2020 would feature from these 500 those who have the most the most appealing social impact story.
Yes.
So it's not just being influential for being influential's sake, but what is the social impact that your life story is creating?
Absolutely.
So that's what we like to do. And we created a platform for each of the honorees to discover their social impact number. So that is SDGs, that's the UN Sustainable Development Goals.
Right.
So within the frameworks of that, the 17 goals to transform our world, we've created a platform for our honorees to discover their social impact number. And you can also discover what your social impact number is by visiting SDGs, that's Sustainable Development Goals, www.mipad.org to discover your primary social impact number, because influence can only be understood when it's manifested based on the social impact that your life story is creating.
Thank you so much for the social impact and
Absolutely.
global impact that you're creating.
Absolutely.
I
Thank
can't
you so
wait
much.
to see what this becomes 20 years from now. Regardless of when the decade is over,
or not.
we will continue this journey.
Amen.
Amen. For our children and our children's children.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for coming. And this is Pamela Anchang on Africa Speaks. See you next time.